Hello, and thank you for listening to our presentation, which title is an overall development model for transforming areas. Development of emerging countries in a global perspective is a great opportunity for the entire world. Our research allowed us to assert that development is a process and that, as most of the processes, it can be managed. We analyzed many development plans implemented in Asia, India, Philippines, and Myanmar, and in Africa, South Africa, Ethiopia, and Benin, including the cultural and social ones, in order to understand if these countries had a vision of their long-term economic and human development. Then, we used the macroeconomic data to compare the economic performance of the 6 countries, so to verify if economic development may be carried on together with social and human development. Supported by a robust economic literature and by the data we collected, our study presents a long-term perspective on development that focuses on self-development as an answer to volatility and complexity for emerging countries. In the last years, economic development of some of the countries we analyzed may be considered as quite good, more if we consider the international crisis that hit most of the advanced countries since 2009. Then, if we analyze GDP in real terms, we may notice a huge difference among the countries we analyzed. From 2000 to 2015, GDP in these 6 countries is really variable. Then we also may consider that between the highest GDP, that is the Indian GDP, and the lowest GDP, that is the GDP of Benin, there is a difference of more 2,000 billions of US dollars. So what we see in this figure is that the most dynamic country in terms of GDP is India, which growth never stops. We can just see a slowdown in 2009 and then another slowdown from 2011 to 2013. The second highest GDP is the one of South Africa, and maybe one of the most dynamic performances is the Philippines performance, while the other countries, Myanmar, Benin, and Ethiopia, don't show growth at all. Then, since GDP grew during the last 15 years, we could expect a growth in GNI per capita too. This is a way that we use to analyze whether the richness that is produced within a country will be enough for all the people that live in the country if all this richness was equally distributed among them. Then we use the purchasing power parity methodology that allows us to understand which is the real purchasing power of $1 in each country if compared with the average consumptions of a standard consumer in that country. What we see then is that South Africa is the richest country in terms of GNI per capita PPP, since its absolute level in 2015 is almost $13,000, while the poorest country is Benin, since in the same year GNI per capita PPP amounted to $2,050. Despite that, we may see in the figure that most of the countries showed a dynamic trend of growth that almost never stops, except for the Philippines, whose GNI per capita PPP decreases in 2011, but then it starts increasing again from that year on. We know that GDP has been criticized during the last years since it can't capture the absolute level of well-being of the population. This is why, in our perspective, we used also some social indicators such as life expectancy at birth, or health expenditure per capita, or even median years of schooling. The first indicator, life expectancy at birth, allows us to understand how many years a child that is born today could live if the conditions in his country remain as they are today. So what we see here is that life expectancy at birth is growing for most of the countries, except for South Africa. Indeed, South Africa shows the lowest life expectancy at birth. It's just 57 years in 2014, and it also decreased from 2000 to 2006. While the highest values are in India, both in India and the Philippines, because both countries show 68 years of life expectancy at birth. Furthermore, we must notice that the most dynamic country is Ethiopia, whose life expectancy at birth is growing very fast during the last 15 years. And this is the result of the plans that the national government implemented during the last years in health. Also, the countries, anyway, show a positive trend during the last 15 years. About the health expenditure per capita, we are using data from the World Bank. This is a current US dollars data, and South Africa shows the highest health expenditure per capita, which amount is $570. And so this is a strange thing, because South Africa shows the lowest life expectancy at birth, but the highest expenditure in health. And while Myanmar has the lowest level at all, because it equals $20. But what we see in the figure is the huge difference between South Africa and the other countries. And this is because South Africa is the richest country with respect to the population, because we saw that India shows the highest GDP in real terms, but actually its population, the population of this country, is so wide that the richness per capita is quite low. Then we also analyzed the median years of schooling from 1990 to 2014, and we saw that we know that we did this because we know that education is one of the fundamental tools for development of a country, and this is supported by a lot of literature and also many studies from the World Bank, and all of them assert that education has a great influence and a positive influence on development and human health. So we also found out that children that are born from educated mothers have more chance not to die during their childhood, and also to be completely vaccinated. So our analysis showed us that all the countries that we may see in the table actually lack a wide and stable strategy in terms of education, and that also territorial inequalities and also inequalities between the rural and the urban areas. Furthermore, gender inequalities are still quite high in education. Indeed, we see that in many countries, in most countries, we cannot see a huge increase in the median years of schooling, except for Benin and for South Africa. So, this is the situation. So, who is supporting development? We analyzed the sector of cooperation and so tried to synthesize the actors of development, and this is one of our figures. And actually, actors of development, we may consider them as all those organizations, institutions, and people who act for human development. Many different actors may intervene in many different areas or topics. Most of them, anyway, support a growth process and try to support people, even if they are not the direct beneficiaries of the interventions. In the development process, we may find different actors, different kind of actors. We have main actors, we have secondary actors, we have global, regional, and local actors, and we have also public, private, and mixed actors. So that's not easy to provide a classification of all the kinds of actors in a development process. Anyway, here we try to do so, and this is a matrix. And among the public actors, we find intergovernmental global actors, intergovernmental regional actors, and governmental and local public actors. Governmental actors are those organizations that are founded by just one government, like governmental commissions, public universities, public enterprises, and so on, while global intergovernmental actors are the structures that may include governments that are located in various continents, or while regional actors, they are located in the same region. We also have these private actors that are non-governmental actors, and we will find it later on, and with the acronym NGAs. And we have multinational non-governmental actors that are both private and global, regional non-governmental actors that are private and regional, and local non-governmental actors that are private and local. And finally, we have mixed actors, and we find all those foundations, associations, commissions, and also companies that are founded on partnerships based on the coexistence of public and private actors, like the Global Fund for fighting HIV. Let's move on and let's see which is the current situation in terms of development. We find an overcomplicated system of Chinese boxes, because we find many actors that are playing together and that are trying to intervene together without coordination or a strategic management. So we have government, we have bilateral plans, we have intergovernmental plans, we have plans made by the NGAs. It's a lot of factors that are intervening at the same time, and the result is too many plans which are not coordinated on each other, and it's maybe too many plans, even more if we consider them in terms of the actual results they're able to bring. Which are the main problems in this situation? The first one is that solutions are often set on the basis of the previous experiences of the advanced countries. And this happens because most of the programs are led by international organizations. And so this is the easiest thing to do, just base the intervention on the mindset of the advanced countries. And the second problem is that plans and actions that are implemented are not coordinated, as we have seen before. So it's a confusion, and in this confusion, non-governmental actors or NGAs may tend to act like a parastate. What is a parastate? There is a set of problems that the national governments are not able to face and solve, and so NGAs identify the problem, try to find the solutions, and these solutions may be the ones that the government would have adopted or not, and then implements a new system. And this is made by a formal agreement with national government or even not. And let's see what happens. For example, in the field of education, if civil society, if NGAs find that an area is characterized by a high illiteracy rate, it may decide to intervene autonomously, like building a new school or find a way to use an existing one. And this is made with private funds, so they can hire teachers. They also come from abroad and they are not subject to a national competition, and may set a direct communication with local territories where they already act and local population, trying to convince them to send their children to school. And this is one of the main strengths of the NGAs. Since they operate close to the local community, they may be felt like they are more reliable, and so local communities may trust them more than what they would do with their government. Obviously, this is an official way, but it helps solving problems through the creation of a parastate, that is, an alternative model of government that acts independently from the government itself. So this would seem perfect. This could seem like a solution, but even in this case, the solutions are left to an autonomous initiatives and somehow bypass the creation of a national strategy in sectors that may be considered as essential for the overall development of a country, such as education or health, and so on. So which is the focal point? We have at least 3 focal points. The first one is that in the emerging countries, governments should be more involved, and they should take the role of the protagonist of the development path of the country. The second one is that there is a lack of a vision of a strategy by national governments, and often they just accept international help, but it's not enough because they need a vision of the development path and what is really needed in the country. Just them, they're the only one who knows it. And then we must consider health and education as the key factors for development. So let's get to the point. What do we suggest? this is the situation. What we suggest is an overall development management model. In the moment in which a government wants to start a development path, it is in the first phase. We may see on the x-axis the three phases of this process. The first one is the startup phase, the second one is the hang-up phase, the third one is the self-development phase. In the first phase, that is the startup phase, the main actors are the Sustainable Development State, that is the SDS that we may see on the top, the international community, IC, throughout bilateral or multilateral plans, and intergovernmental institutions, and NGOs, so non-governmental actors. In the first startup phase, even if international community is quite relevant, since it has to provide material and immaterial resources, NGOs, they must implement the strategies, and they have to collect information from the local communities. In the startup phase, we have 5 steps of planning. The strategic analysis, that is the A, the identification of the strategies that we may find with letter S, the planification, that is P, implementation, that is I, and control, that is C. These steps use tools provenient from different management approaches like the Gantt and the PER chart, the milestone, the experiments, the solar system, HRM, and so on. So each country or each area that wants to start its development process may use these 5 steps according to its own peculiarities, and so that it can create a very peculiar development process and development path. We have the country analysis, the country strategy, and this is our respectively CA and CS, the country planning, that is CP, the country implementation, CI, and the country control, CC. As we may see in the figure, in this first phase of the process, the creation of development is primarily deriving from a coordinated work where SDS and IC work together, and NGA's weight is quite limited. In the hang-on phase, what the country needs is to sustain growth and is to create development, and this is the first thing that is very peculiar of our model, that the resources provening from the sources that are coming from abroad must be progressively abandoned, because the country needs to find its own development path, and this must be led by an independent approach. We want to overcome dependency of the emerging countries from international help. So this is why NGAs and the population start to be more significant also for planning development. Here, population must be involved, and so we must go both on a top-down and a bottom-up approach, and this is the key, so that the development process may be felt like something that everybody is working on, And SDS, with a light support from the international community, is still the fundamental actor of development. In this phase, these actors try to intervene on 4 areas of development that are CA, CS, CP, and CI. And the control is just used to monitor the implementation of the plan and the use of the methodology. Local NGAs, so in this second hang-on phase, are more and more important, because population, as we said before, must be involved so that they may feel their own development like something that they are contributing at. Then, as the hang-on phase ends, if everything worked well, the country goes through an independent development, the so-called self-development, whose primary actors are the SDS, or the government, and the NGAs. These 2 actors together may create and implement the strategic plan and the development process of the country, and they always implement this strategy in a synergic way. In this self-development phase, we have so many different methods and so many different steps, because we want to provide the country with the method and the tools that may be more useful according to what the government, and I mean the country as a whole, identified like its own peculiar development path. So we have a similar structure with CA, CS, CP, CI, and CA, and so we find that we have the control phase that goes on and on, because it becomes a circle. So we control what has been done since now, and then we start over and over. It's a virtuous process. And this happens when everything went right. But during the hang-on phase, it may happen that something doesn't work, and so that the country can move on to a deeper and wider development process. If it happens, maybe the country will need more and more international development aids. And so what we currently see is this situation of welfare. It's a welfare state where the country depends on international community, and as we may see, both the national government and NGAs wait less, since international community is the one that leads the development of the country. And we see that here we don't have a country distinctive features like we see in the self-development phase, that is the ascending path. In this decreasing path that leads to welfare state, we have a traditional cooperation system that is the one we are used to, as we said before, we find a huge importance of international community. This is not a lifelong lifelong phase, because it's not a steady state. In any moment, the country may decide to start a new process, and so it comes back to the startup phase. Actually, you may see that this is just a model. So we are trying to, we are looking for inputs and for suggestions provening from both academia and national governments, and also actors of development. So we really need your help. We ask you please to write us with your suggestions and with your impressions on our presentation and our model. And we also remind you that the big part of our study has been recently published in a book that is Development Management of Transforming Economies. And so please let us know which are your impressions and write us. And thank you so much for your attention.